Hello, students. You are watching yours and my channel. Before we start with the next literary topic, please do like, share, and subscribe my channel. Today, we are going to take up another poem of our ICSE syllabus 2024-25, that is Considerable SPECK. Okay, that's the name of your poem. Now, before we start with the poem, once again we need to know about the background, about the writer of the poem, which will make it more clear for us to understand. Obviously, the name of the poet is Robert Frost. We are quite familiar of the literary works or the poems of Robert Frost before. Some of the famous poems of Robert Frost, which we have studied earlier, I think all of us have studied Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. All of us have gone through this poem. The Road Not Taken. These are some of the eminent poems of Robert Frost. He was one of the greatest America's greatest of the poets, received many honors than any other contemporary literary figures in USA. Now, the present poem, that is a considerable speck, is a wonderful description of intelligence in action. The subject of the poem is nothing but an insignificant small insect, which we call as mite, M-I-T-E, okay, which has been discovered by the poet on a sheet of paper. The opening lines of the poem are an account of the mite's or the insect's terrible fear, and in its frantic effort, it tries to run away from that page of writing. And he has been very minutely observed by the poet. It's only when the mite moves that the narrator realizes that the speck is a living mite. It's not a dead one, it's not a speck of dust, but it's a living insect. Once he realizes that it is intelligent, he follows its desperate actions with interest. The poet goes on to explain the reason why the narrator chooses to save the life of the insect. Clear? So the poem, which we are going to study now, it highlights the poet's ability to give importance to the minute details of life. Here he notices a tiny speck of dust. Initially, he took that small insect as a small speck of dust. But later on, when he observes it minutely, he finds that it's a small insect trying to save its life. When it sensed that some danger is lying ahead of it. Finally, the mite or the insect surrenders to the will of the narrator to kill or it allow it to live. That depends upon the sweet will of the narrator, whether the insect will live or the insect is going to die. The poet finds it harmless and leaves the insect to use its intelligence. Poet is surprised to see that small tiny creature is blessed with the ability to think, and so he allows the insect to rest on that sheet of paper as long as it desires. Now let's come to the theme of the poem. The poet wants to highlight the importance of having one's own mind. During his times, human beings merely accepted things without giving a second thought to it. Even a small insect or a tiny mite displays his mind when he runs around. Sometimes it pauses, stops, then flies, trying to save itself. The narrator appreciates the tiny creature for displaying its mind. Now we will come to the stanza wise explanation, which will make it easy for us to understand. Clear? Now, here we don't have, since it's a modern poem, you will find that we don't have the clear cut stanza, division of stanza. But then I'll just read out the few lines, and then again I'll explain, and then again I will go to the next lines. Clear? A speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but on a paper sheet so white, set off across what I had written there, and I had idly poised my pen in air to stop it with a period of ink, when something strange about it made me think this was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living might, with inclinations it could call its own. There was a tiny piece of dirt on the white sheet of paper on which the narrator was writing something. He would not have noticed it or observed it had it not been on the clean white sheet. The particle flew off, and the narrator thought that his breath had blown it off. But later, when he saw it again minutely, he found that the particle was running here and there. And then immediately he understood that it was a small insect or a mite, but not a particle of dust or a speck of dust. The insect could think it was running around to save its life. It paused as with suspicion of my pen, and then came racing wildly on again to where my manuscript was not yet dry, then paused again and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly, plainly with an intelligence I dealt. The insect stopped running because it was very much afraid that the narrator would hit it with his pen and it was going to die very soon. Then all of a sudden it started running towards the area of the paper where the narrator had written something, and the ink was not yet dry, so it was still wet. The insect stopped, and perhaps it smelt or drank the wet ink. It must have disliked it. It was not good for him, so it might have disliked it, for it turned out and flew again from there. The narrator used his intelligence to deal with this small insect. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete. To express how much it didn't want to die, it ran with terror and with cunning crept. It faltered, I could see it hesitate. Then in the middle of the open sheet, cowered down in desperation to accept whatever I accorded it of fate. The insect was very small, that it seemed that there was no space for feet in its body. But still, it had a pair of small feet with which it was running to save its life. It ran out of fear and was clever to use different tactics to save its life, even at the 11th hour. The narrator could make out that the insect was very scared because it lacked confidence, and at times it was running, even though it did not like it. The insect came to the center of the paper and just remained there as if it has given up or surrendered to the narrator, as if it wants to say, it's up to you whether you take my life or not. I have none of the tenderer than thou, collectivistic, regimenting love, with which the modern world is being swept. But this poor microscopic item now, since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. Now, tenderer than thou, that is more loving. The phrase means more loving. Collectivistic, concerned, it means concerned with some group or a class or a society. Clear? So the narrator says that he did not have any affection or love for the insect, just like a group of people have towards other group, wherein they try to save and protect them. But he also says that it was a tiny insect, and since it was harmless, the narrator decided to let it live. The narrator did not want to kill it. He did not do anything to the insect, but he allowed it to remain there till it wanted to go to sleep. I have a mind myself and recognize. Mind when I meet with it in any guise. No one can know how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mind. The narrator or the poet also has a mind, and he can identify another mind, here the mind of the insect, whichever form it may be in. The poet could even identify that the dust particle was in fact a living mind. It was an insect, living, because its movement indicated that it could think and was deciding what would the next course of action be. He was very glad, very happy to find the show of the intelligence on the part of that small insect on the sheet of paper. Now, here in this poem, we will come across with a few figures of speech. Now, before we go to the figures of speech, the rhyming pattern of the poem is irregular. It's a sort of blank verse where no definite rhyming pattern is followed. Will I come across with oxymoron? Oxymoron, what is it? The adjective which is used for a noun is contrary to the noun's qualities. For example, considerable speck. We come across imageries. Visual imageries have been used to show the movement of the insect. And there are quite a lot of alliterations. That is the repetition of the consonant in the two consecutive words in the beginning. Here we find been beneath. Be is used in the two consecutive words in the beginning. Made me, am. Breathing blown, be again. Something strange, s, in the two consecutive words. Could call, see in the two words. My manuscripts, repetition of the consonant m. Too tiny, repetition of the consonant t. Have had, repetition of the consonant h. Cunning crept, repetition of the consonant c. With which, repetition of the consonant w. Mind myself, repetition of the consonant m in the two consecutive words. We'll again get an example of anaphora. Two or more consecutive lines start with the same word. I let it lie there till I hope it slept. I have a mind myself and recognize. These are the examples of anaphora. We will also see inversion. The structure of the sentences changed. This was no dust speck by my breathing blown. Plainly, with an intelligence I dealt, so the structure of the sentences altered or changed. Enchantment, when the same sentence continues to the next lines and the lines do not have any punctuation mark in the end. So we find examples of enjambment also in the poem. This is not a very lengthy poem. I feel that you have liked the poem because of its inner meaning. The first stand of the literary meaning is very simple, that there is a small insect or a tiny mite on the paper, on the sheet of paper. But the figurative meaning will really make you think twice. It's a beautiful poem of Robert Frost. So I request you to go through the explanations, listen to the explanations again and again, which will prove to be beneficial for you, along with the figures of speech that I have mentioned at last in the poem. I hope this will again be a help for you. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you.